Throughout China, word spread of the unbelievable news. A commoner could get into the emperor's palace. For this to happen, one had to undergo a very rigorous selection process. It was clear that no one would be allowed in to see the most powerful man in the country without this. Representatives of the palace traveled around the towns and small villages, compiling a list of those wishing to win the top prize. According to the emperor's will, men were not allowed to take part. As a result, there were 5,000 applications from girls. The lucky girls were invited to the palace, but of course, they had to undergo many tests before they could meet the emperor. The first screening eliminated 1,000 at once. On the second day, the court officials interviewed the remaining candidates. They screened out another 2,000 girls. Then it was time for the physical examination. Due to ill health, illness, and inadequacy, another 1,700 went home. The remaining 300, like in such an ancient reality show, went to a training camp. There, experts assessed their qualities, manners and temperament, virtues and erudition. It was at this stage the best 50 candidates were chosen to stand before Emperor Zhu Yuzhai, the 15th ruler of China from the great Ming Dynasty. After tough trials and numerous selections, the anxious girls did not know what to expect. Here they stood before the great emperor. Among the contenders were the daughter of a Manchu duke of the third class, Ziki. She stood confidently but respectfully before the monarch. The Emperor Tianqi paced among the candidates, examining each one closely. At last, he pointed to 3, and the girls who didn't make it were immediately led out of the hall. These 3 chosen ones were left in the palace while they gave the others to the nobles. All the girls became concubines. Up until 1949, when the Communist Party came to power, cohabitation was allowed in China. It didn't sound terrible, but in fact, concubines became slaves, and many girls, especially those from low-income families, aspired to such a life. It wasn't easy to find a husband, nor was it easy to find work as a servant in a wealthy family. There were 2 options: to become a concubine or become a prostitute. The last option left an indelible mark on a girl and was only chosen in case of extreme need. Polygamy was also discouraged in China, so it was officially permitted to marry only one woman. But in addition to her, a man could buy his concubines. There was a period when the law controlled the number of concubines. However, generally speaking, there was an unspoken rule. The richer and more powerful a man was, the more concubines he could have. And yet it was always the royal palace that was in charge. A candidate for a place in the imperial harem could have any background. There were daughters of poor peasants and noble parents. Girls ranged in age from 13 to 16. Anyone younger or older was eliminated in the selection stages. They also sent them home for being too tall or too short, too skinny or too fat. The emperor himself dictated the criteria. Candidates had their lips and nose, their breasts and feet checked. They strictly evaluated the timbre of voice, diction, and facial expressions. The next stage of the test was character, temperament, and manners. The girls were carefully checked and trained. As they progressed through the young concubine course, candidates were divided according to their performance. Some Chinese women already had the right attributes, while others were quick learners. In the final stages of training, girls were required to know morals, philosophy, mathematics, the arts, and literature. At the end of their training, they were given tests and examinations. The results were used to rank the candidates according to their academic performance, and only then were they presented to the emperor. When the monarch made his choice, a new circle of hell began for the lucky ones. They sent them to a palace complex called the Forbidden City. The concubines could no longer leave its confines or communicate with their parents and relatives. From then on, they belonged entirely to the emperor. The concubines' daily routine was harsh, as was the relationship between them. There was a clear and inviolable hierarchy within the harem. The ranks, their number, and titles changed from time to time. The Qing dynasty had one of the most straightforward systems for classifying concubines. Initially, selected girls found themselves in the 2 lowest statuses, second-class and first-class workers. There could be an unlimited number of such concubines. They served as maids for the women in the harem and received no noticeable benefits. The workers could have 2 or 3 helpers, depending on their class. The next rank was that of Gurin. noble ladies. The title was awarded if the girl was the most beautiful at the selection or came from a noble family. The Garins were still at the lowest levels of the hierarchy. They lived in shared dormitories, but 2 pairs of maids helped them with their daily chores. It was not till the 4th step in the hierarchy that the Imperial Concubines, or PIN, actually emerged. There were only 6 girls in this status. They had average authority in the harem and lived in separate rooms. Each PIN had 6 helpers at her disposal. 4 concubines were allowed consort status. They received the same privileges as the PIN. Additionally, each symbolizes one of the virtues: Gui for nobility, Xian for virtue, Shu for kindness or gentleness, and Di for morality. In the rank of the Imperial Consort, or Jifi, there were only 2 concubines. They wielded great power within the harem. The Guifi lived in luxurious apartments and were served by as many as 8 assistants. The highest possible title among the concubines was Huang Gifi, Imperial Noble Consort. This unique rank placed the girl in the status of the right hand of the emperor, an empress herself. Huang Yifi was a particular favorite of the ruler and helped his official wife manage her harem. She also had separate chambers and 8 maids in her charge. But this place could remain vacant when the empress did not need help or if the monarch did not have a favorite among his concubines. Rank in this hierarchy determined how much influence and privilege a woman would have, so there was a constant fierce competition for a place in the harem. Their position could be improved or lost daily. The girls continued their training and embroidered. However, their statuses were most strongly influenced by the emperor's taste. Those girls he chose more often for his pleasures climbed the hierarchical ladder faster. One of the main trumps was the birth of a child. Though these children had a lower status than their official heirs, boys were much more valued, and failure to give birth could greatly diminish a concubine's status. To prevent the emperor's concubines from having sexual relations with other men, they were constantly watched by eunuchs. A violation of this rule was punishable by death. Only in exceptional circumstances could a female concubine leave the palace compound with the monarch's permission. All this led to the concubines waging war against each other. They made intrigues and plots, sometimes even disfiguring their appearance or killing their rivals. In such an environment, each girl was left on her own. There were no girlfriends in the harem, only rivals. They couldn't trust anyone in the palace or talk to anyone outside the palace. So the emperor's concubines found themselves all alone. The only thing left for them was to fight for the best place in the harem. It wasn't just a matter of survival. Consort rank gave a concubine a certain amount of influence in the royal court. Everyone in the harem knew the story of Wu Zishan. The young Chinese girl came to the palace as the concubine of Emperor Taizong. There, she fell in love with the monarch's son, but he was not allowed to touch her. When the ruler died, Wu Zaitan, according to tradition, was sent to a Buddhist monastery. The son of the dead, Tai Song, became the new emperor and began to visit his father's former concubine in the monastery. After a while, he took her back to the palace. Such an act was against the rules of the time and amounted to incest, but the ruler ignored the outrage of the aristocracy. When the concubine's daughter died, Wu Zaitan blamed Empress Wang for her murder. This was the final straw for the enamored ruler, and he dismissed his official wife, taking Wu Zaitan in her place. The concubine bore the emperor 4 sons. When this monarch also passed away, Si Tan took control of the country. At first, she replaced her sons on the throne, and in 690, she took over the empire, proclaiming a new dynasty of Wuzhou. The former concubine ruled China for 40 years, becoming the first female ruler in the country's history. The story was retold in the harems like a Cinderella tale. Not everyone aspired to repeat Wu Zaitan's path, and only the most naive girls believed it was possible. The daughter of a Manchu duke, Cixi, did not hold out any hope when she found herself among Emperor Zhu Yiju's chosen ladies in 1851. Her harem origins earned her the rank of Giren, and in little less than a year, she became the emperor's concubine. 5 years after moving to the Forbidden City, Zizi gave birth to a son, for which she was promoted to consort in the hierarchy. When the Manchu concubine's son was a year old, she was promoted to the rank of Imperial Consort. There was no woman with the title of Huang Ji-fei in the harem, so CZ was the second woman in the palace after the Empress. This was possible for two reasons. First, CZ's son was the emperor's only heir. Secondly, the Manchu beauty could read and write Chinese. When the elderly emperor became ill, the concubine helped him with his affairs of state. Later, the weak-minded Zhu Yaizhu fell into depression and died, and she was given the title of Empress Dowager. CZ's son became the official heir to the throne, but at that time, the boy was only 5 years old, and power was in the hands of 8 regents. The former concubine, skilled in the art of plotting, arranged everything so that power fell into her hands. Empress Dowager ZZ ruled China for 47 years until her death. Don't let these Hollywood-worthy success stories fool you. The word for concubine translates as slave, because that's how the girls were treated in the empire. Because the girls belonged entirely to the emperor, they were often killed after his death so that the monarch would not be bored in the afterlife. Concubines never knew what would happen to them tomorrow. What do you think? Is the wealth and life in the imperial palace worth all the intrigue and power struggles? Write about it in the comments. If you liked the video, give us a like, subscribe to the channel, and click on the notification bell to not miss the next episodes.